right. Thank you very much. I would like to speak on the recent developments regarding the Bulgarian-Turkish economic and political relations during the post-accession period. I would like to give a brief outline of the paper. The Bulgarian EU membership, of course, changed the dynamics of the Bulgarian-Turkish relations on the political and economic fronts, giving a great deal of political leverage for Bulgaria, while to some extent constricting the Bulgarian-Turkish relations, especially after the 2007 accession of Bulgaria into the EU. But currently, the Turkish companies on the economic front are viewing Bulgaria as a gateway for access to the wider EU markets, and of course making great deal of investments in Bulgaria economically, and the greenfield investments are particularly interesting, and I will speak about those developments in a short while. On the other hand, there is a growing trade between the two countries. They are only an EU apart, but of course, as we will see, a lot of historical and economic and cultural relations actually exist between the two countries over the years. And of course, I will try to briefly talk about the recent developments regarding the Turkish, the perception towards Turkey as a soft power, not only in the Middle East and other areas, but also in the Balkans. But the one good thing about this is probably is the changing perceptions regarding Turkey in Bulgaria due to for instance, the arrival of some Turkish film productions in Bulgaria, as well as in Middle East and other parts of the Europe. And of course, we will briefly talk about the obstacles and the potential areas of improvement between the two countries. When we look at historical developments, of course, we have to note the fact that the Ottoman rule and the legacy of the Ottoman so to speak, bondage is quite important for the political landscape of Bulgaria, especially to some extent shaping the domestic policy environment on the political front. Of course, we also have to make a note of the fact that there is a sizable Turkish population even after the independence of Bulgaria from the Ottoman Empire. This sizable Turkish population, which amounts to currently around 8% of the population, remains intact, and they are concentrated in the southeastern part of the country, and that of course adds to the image, the perception of the Turkish historical domination of the region. And but when we look at the historical developments, we see some state strategies after the independence, state strategies towards the Turkish minority, and of course this involved population transfers, forced immigration, bipartisan arbitration through bilateral agreements, and to some extent over this period we have seen Bulgarian government actually extending some religious and cultural freedom, yet at the expense of lower social and socioeconomic status. When we speak about or consider the communist regime or that period after 1945, we see that during that period the Turkish minority has been integrated into this social society, but at a limited level of religious and cultural freedoms, and there has been some minor improvements in the standard of living and economic status. To some that might be considered quite decent, or I would say to some extent adequate or sufficient. But when we come to the 60s and the 1970s, we first of all see that the communist dictator, basically, the Todor Zhivkov, and the party itself, the Communist Party, saw the Turkish high birth rate as a major threat to the Bulgarian population, or society, I should say. And of course, this was viewed as something like a Turkish minority dominating the Bulgarian society. And of course, I can say that this is probably part of the reason why a renaming process has actually started during the 1984, 86, 89 period. And the campaign actually, which meant in this period, the campaign of assimilation, of course, climaxed with the forced name changing process, which was initiated against 800,000 ethnic Turks, which was followed by the Great Excursion of 1989 of some 300,000 Turkish ethnic Turks who emigrated to Turkey during this period. And of course, an international crisis followed this large wave of immigrants, and Turkey eventually closed its borders because of the influx of all these migrants into Turkey. And of course, Turkey responded with a claim against Bulgaria in the United Nations. After the changes or the transition to democracy and the free market economy in 1990s, Bulgaria actually made an apology to Turkey, and the Turkish minorities received their original names. And we also see that during that period, a nascent political development turned into a legalized ethnic party under the name Movement for Rights and Freedoms. And this party was actually headed by a controversial figure called Ahmet Doğan. And recently there was an assassination attempt against Doğan during a party meeting, a platform. And of course, we see also that we have to note that in 1990s, this party was a balancer in politics, and it switched sides between BSP, Bulgarian Socialist Party, and the United Democratic Front, and still managed to, I think, quite successfully to hold some even key ministerial positions in 2001 and 2005. During the current GERB rule, this is the current ruling party, Citizens for the European Development of Bulgaria. Actually, MRF is in opposition right now, and there has been a lot of accusations of corruption, and some anti-MRF campaign has been led also by GERB and the Blue Coalition. So the current status of MRF is one of controversy, I have to add that. And but nevertheless, we have to note that the Bulgarian ethnic model in the 1990s has been quite peaceful, and it was an important factor in leading Bulgaria into accession with the EU. Because Bulgaria prevented, there was, amidst ethnic conflicts across the Balkans, actually there was a peaceful ethnic transition, a democratic transition that stood apart from the spreading ethnic conflict in the Balkans, and that, of course, is a big credit for Bulgaria. Now, as I mentioned before, there's around 8% Turkish minority living in Bulgaria, and that constitutes the largest percentage-wise minority in the EU. And it is an important matter how the Turkish minority is perceived, along with Turkey. We observe a very dramatic improvement in terms of tolerance towards minorities in Bulgaria, but I think we have to keep Roma population and treat it as differently from the Turkish population. For instance, we see higher, much higher positive attitudes towards ethnic Turks as compared to Roma in Bulgaria. There has been some concern about the rise of radical Islam in Bulgaria, but this, of course, has been generally associated with Saudi Arabia rather than Turkey in Bulgaria. Recently, as I mentioned before, there has been an assault on the leader of MRF during the 8th National Conference, and what followed was the party leader Dogan resigned from his post, and he was replaced by Lutfi Mestan, who is the new MRF leader as of January 2013. But I think I need to make the point here that this new MRF leader, the Turkish ethnic party, I should really share this with you, it made a remark on how the ethnic minorities are perceived in the Balkan region, and actually asked also for a European minority status. Ethnic minorities in Balkan countries should be granted a European minority status to integrate them better into the society, he remarked. In all nation states, especially in Southern Europe, namely the Balkans, there is a strong ethnocentrism, and this stonewalls the integration process. This idea does not consider cultural differences between different ethnicities as cultural capital, but as a threat to national interest. And I think this ties very well with your discussion then on the Kurdish-Turkish issue. So this, I think, really dramatically summarizes what the situation is regarding the treatment of the minorities in the Balkan countries. But when we look at the Turkish and the Bulgarian relations, we see a lot of cooperation on the economic front, and in key areas like energy, infrastructure, construction, agriculture, and tourism, and a lot of official visits are taking place between Bulgaria and Turkey. So yes, one country is in the EU, the other one is not, but there is a great deal of strong political and diplomatic relationship that exists between the countries. I would like to note that. But what is interesting is really the economic relations. We have seen a rapid progress on both the economic and political fronts since 1990s, and especially noteworthy is the strong trade and foreign direct investment ties. We have seen steady progress between the two countries through bilateral agreements, especially the penetration of the Turkish firms and joint ventures with Bulgarian partners is quite noteworthy, quite telling. More than 3,000 firms operate in Bulgaria of Turkish origin, and Turkish contracting firms are have undertaken lots of projects, construction projects worth more than $1.5 billion by 2008, and they're building a lot of roads and centers and airports and so on. And the bilateral trade is amazing, more than $4.5 billion, tripling since 2003. And of course, at the heart of these developments, I think we should note that increasingly Bulgaria is perceived as a strategic market from the viewpoint of Turkey, trying to diversify into different areas in order to promote its pace of economic growth. And of course, Bulgaria is a strategic EU market for their expansion of sales and exports. And also we see a keen interest on the part of the Turkish firms in the privatization programs since the beginning of the privatization in Bulgaria. Like we see a lot of hotels owned and operated by the Turkish firms, and in the financial sector, lots of banks are increasingly showing interest in the Bulgarian market. And we see in telecommunications area, for instance, some strategic acquisitions have been attempted. Some have been have failed, but nevertheless, this shows a lot of interest. And we see also a major glass producer company, Şişe Cam Group of Turkey, actually constructing the Tergovişte plant under the name Trakya Glass in 2004, employing more than 1,500 Bulgarians in its plant. Also, we see a lot of construction taking place in Bulgaria, and those are led by the Turkish companies. In addition, a lot of companies like Mitra, Zorli Linens, and Altınbaş and Damat, and these are some of the major brands in Turkey, actually opening stores in Sofia and Plovdiv. And highway construction is, of course, and is another important matter. Then we look at the Bulgarian FDI in Turkey. Surprisingly, for some, actually lots of companies, given the size of Bulgaria, 95 Bulgarian companies operate in Turkey, and one especially quite well known, Prista Oil, it constitutes the largest Bulgarian foreign investment with a blending plant operated near Bursa since 2003. Well, when we look at the potential for closer cooperation, we see that there's a great deal of potential, even though there has been a history of tension and conflict in the past. Currently, we see a lot of changes, from the Bulgarian point of view towards towards Turkey and the Turkish minority, and that is very positive and objective, despite the of course, problems and some sort of, actually past conflicts. But it is interesting to note that Turkish media productions and soap operas, as they are called, and the film productions are actually making a lot of impact, probably, and showing the cultural similarities across these nations. Of course, still, I do think, and my co-author also believes, that there are political obstacles generally deriving from the domestic political environment, and of course sometimes we see neo-Ottomanism, and there's this fear of neo-Ottomanism due to the growing importance of Turkey as a key economic and political power both in Europe and Asia. And of course the issue of minority rights is a recurring source of contention in the Bulgaria's political arena. And despite all these fears, I think growing cultural interaction, really cultivating the potential to advance future economic and political cooperation between the two countries. And when it comes to the obstacles, we see that small and medium-sized firms in particular, from the Turkish side, are trying to overcome some of these difficulties in initiating joint ventures with Bulgarian firms, and that of course has to do with insufficient Bulgarian capital, the EU regulations, and to some extent waning enthusiasm among the Bulgarian elite to attract Turkish investments. And most noteworthy problems are associated with corruption, bureaucratic red tape. Among those are the ones that are cited as the major problems faced by the Turkish entrepreneurs. And we have to make the point that the foreign investment by the Turkish companies in Bulgaria is still below its potential. And thank you very much. I will take questions later.